we got this Civic here. We suspect it has clutch issue. I'm gonna show you guys how you'll know for sure if your clutch is slipping. But, so now we're at a stop. We're gonna go from first to second, so that's when it's most apparent. So now we got done driving it and we have it back up and on jack stands. Jack stands are important for this because you don't want it falling on you. So next step is we're going to get under it and remove the inspection plate, which is, oh, it looks like it's already removed. So we don't have to do that. Alright, so now I have the wheels off, both wheels, and what I've done is remove the axle in it. Now I believe it's supposed to be a 32mm fastener, or you know, the hex is, but what I used to get it off was a 1 1/4, because that is what I had here, and it took it right off. It fits right on there. There's no slop in it, so that works just fine if that's what you have versus a 32. Or maybe it's a 30, I don't even remember honestly, but it is something like that. What you can do is you can go to O'Reilly's and just rent an axle nut socket box, and it has like 4 of them in there, and it'll have the right size for you. And I think it's like, it can be kind of pricey actually. I think it's maybe like $30 or something like that. But yeah, so now that I have that undone, what I'm going to do next is make sure I have the key in it so that I can turn the wheel left and right. But also I'm going to remove these tie rod end nuts, and I believe they are 17s. But yeah, I believe they're 17s, so I'm going to take those off, hammer them out of there, because you know you got to take the nut off, and keep the nut on the stud just a little bit to protect it. And then you want to beat on the edge of this tie rod, or not the tie rod, but the knuckle here, to loosen any rust up, and it should pop right out of there. And you want to do that just so you can move this knuckle over far enough to push this axle. You can see it comes out a little bit right there, but not necessarily enough. So that's our goal. Alright, so now I got the tie rod in removed, and the order you do this part in is actually up to you. It's probably actually better to break the lower ball joint loose first and then do the tie rod in, but if you don't have an impact, that's probably the way you want to do it. But I have an impact, so I'm doing the tie rod first and then the lower ball joint. But you want to go and get the lower ball joint off, so you'll be able to swing the knuckle out and get it all out of there. So there's the lower ball joint, and you're probably going to have to hammer that too. So same way, you want to hit probably the control arm in this case. You want to put the nut back on the stud. You're going to put the nut back on here and hammer right here to try to break it loose. You can also, if you have like a CV axle tool, you can shove it into here and hammer it, and it'll split them. But yeah, that's the way you do that. So now I have the lower ball joint broken loose, also the tie rod. Just going to lift up the knuckle and maybe have to slightly pull down the control arm, and then the axle, you should just be able to push the center of it and pop it right out of there. So now you can see I have the axle out. It was a little bit rusted in there. What I had to do was just get a socket. I use a 17mm one, not that it really matters, but just one that fits inside of the hub and still hits the axle. And I just hammered it back through. And what I'm actually seeing that's interesting is, I know this is an ABS car, but these are not ABS axles. It looks like they might have been at one point, but I don't see a toner ring on there, so that is interesting. But yeah, so you want to get this out and then go to the other side and do the same exact thing. Break the axle loose and get it out of the knuckle. Now that we're to this side, there is a toner ring on this axle, so this one does have the correct axle in it. But since we're not actually going to be fully removing the axle, we have no need to. If you were replacing the axles, what you'd have to do is take off this bolt so you can slide the axle through and put a new one in, because usually this side of the axle will not fit through this fork, so you need to unbolt it and put the new one through there. But since we're not removing, what we're just going to do is pop it out of the transmission and slide it forward. We're going to do the same thing to the other side, and then we can start doing bell housing bolts and shift linkage and stuff like that to get start getting the transmission out. Alright, now I already have the passenger side axle out. Now I'm looking at the driver's side, and what I'm probably going to have to do is get this bar, because these half shafts can sometimes be a pain. So what I'm going to do is get my little punch right here and hammer on the back side of the axle to pop it out of the half shaft right there. So that is what I'm going to have to do that. Now, definitely make sure you don't have it connected to the knuckle at this point still. You don't have the knuckle completely out of the way. You don't want to have this one up against the knuckle, and maybe the knuckle still have the lower ball joint in, and start hammering on the back side of it, and you start compressing the bearings and possibly damaging the insides of the axle. Now, if you were replacing the axle, it wouldn't really matter, but since we're going to be reusing those, we're going to try to take care of those bearings. Alright, now I have the axles out and all the suspension that I should need to have out to remove the transmission. What I'm going to do next is remove these 10 millimeter fasteners right here that hold this bracket on. And then there's some 12 millimeters right here that hold the slave on. And I'm going to remove those and just swing the slave cylinder out of the way so I can not have to worry about it whenever the transmission is coming down. Next thing that you're going to want to do is disconnect the starter. That means this wire, the excite wire right there. And I don't see any others, but I'm pretty sure that's all that holds the starter on, besides the bolts, of course. Then you can see the speed sensor down there. It's already disconnected. Now, one thing I found interesting is you can see this white in here, and that white is the retainer to the pins inside of this clip. So at some point someone put a retainer from this clip actually got in here, and it's preventing this from actually snapping all the way down on there. So we're gonna probably try to get that retaining clip out of there and maybe solve the issue of this thing not having an accurate speedometer. So we have that unhooked, and this also went down towards the transmission. I don't know if it hooked onto anything because it wasn't hooked to anything, but this was down there, so you want to unhook that. And then also right here there's a connector, but you don't unhook it down there, you unhook it right here. You need to get those disconnected. Now there's also a big ground right here that was bolted onto this bracket. This one just has a Phillips. I'm sure it was originally a 10 millimeter, but you want to unbolt this also. Before you disconnect the starter though, you want to disconnect the ground so that you don't touch this power against the ground and it end up sparking and arcing and damaging equipment. So go ahead and unhook your ground first before you put a wrench on here and try to turn this and possibly short something. Alright, now we have everything electrical disconnected. So what I'm going to do next is go ahead and undo this engine mount. And man, should I actually do that? Sorry about the noise, there's actually a friggin' MMA thing behind me, but you can see this bolt right there. That's to the T-bracket. You can take that off, and I believe there's one on the lower side, and you should probably actually have one right here as well, if you can even right there, but on the back side T-bracket I'll get under and show you. Alright, so you can see one right there, and there should be one right there, but there's not. And then that's the back side of that bolt up top. So you can take these three out and you should be good. You know, you'd actually probably even be better off just completely taking the T-bracket off, honestly. And that's just that bolt up there too. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing, is taking the whole T-bracket off. You also want to unbolt the half shaft at this point. I guess we should do that. But that's going to be, let's see, it should be one right there, but it's not there. One right there, and then one right there. And then you pop it out of the transmission in a very similar way to that of which you did with the axle. Alright, now I removed these two fasteners. They were 14 millimeter. Now when I'm pulling this out, if you notice, if you just pull it straight, it'll hit this. So you have to rotate it like that. So it'll pull through, and it comes right out. Now, I went ahead and only removed these two bolts. I didn't remove the one that actually goes to the engine mount. I have a jack stand under the engine for whenever I do remove this driver's side mount. It's going to drop down a bit, so yeah. Let's see, what else do we have to do? So like I said, as you can see, I have that T-bracket bolt loosened. Axle's out, half shaft is out. Now, what most people would have to do is somebody confident put their engine together, is they'd have bell housing bolts here they have to get out. But since that's not the case, we don't have to get those out. What I'm probably actually going to do next is go ahead and remove these nuts that attach the transmission to the mount, and hopefully this will lower down pretty easily. So now looking at this, I can see that, let's look back here, yeah, look at that. There's not even a bell housing bolt that goes to the starter there. So the only bolt we have to worry about is this. But if you did have, like I said, I don't even think this goes through the transmission into the engine. So what I think, the only thing we have to do is just drop the transmission at this point. But if you did have a normal situation with a normal people that put bolts back where they should be, you would have bell housing bolts here, I believe. So I believe this one goes to the back side of the starter, but it could be this top one. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this top one just to be sure. Then you're going to have one right there next to the slave. And that may actually be it. I'm going to go check the bottom. Make sure there's not one. You can see this engine is supported lovely right now. And like I said, I think that's actually it, holding this engine to the transmission to the engine. I'm gonna have to remove this linkage here. I forgot about that. Now usually you'll have a pin right here, and this pin is terrible to get out. I'll go ahead and show you it. I have another linkage inside the shop. This right here is the pin that you'd need to remove. It's usually flush with this side, and you can get a 1/4 inch punch and just knock it out of there. But it will, if this is the first time it's been out, which, you know, you're working on an EG Civic, it probably is not. But if this is the first time it's been out, this will be a huge pain to get in and out. So just keep that in mind. Luckily I just have a bolt there, but it's just a hammer and a punch is what you'll have to use to get that out. Now there's also a bolt holding this end to the transmission. It's called the, I think it's called the bracing bar, or something like that. Yeah, right here. And you just grab that and get that out of there. Alright, and then once you get that bolt out and you get your bitch pin out, you just wiggle the linkages off and your linkages are free. Then you just have the bell housing bolts left. As I said, luckily I only have one, but yeah, so we're gonna go from there. Actually, there are 2 bell housing bolts on this one that are left. There's this one, and then one right there, and then it should come out. All right, now all the bell housing bolts are removed. You can see the crack right here in between the tranny and engine. Just got to start to lower the jack. I have a jack supporting this, by the way. You can see it split just a little bit. Probably gonna have to go to the bottom and separate it from the dowels with a pry bar. A little bit of light back here. There it is. Now it's free. Yeah, it's coming. It is? Yeah. And quite a bit of wiggling later, we have the transmission out. So we're gonna go ahead and get our 12.10 millimeter sockets to remove the pressure plate and get the clutch off.
So that's going to be part one because I don't have enough memory on my device to continue filming. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Part two will be coming pretty soon. He had to get a new clutch. We were going to reuse a clutch, which is terrible. Don't do that. But we're going to get a new clutch and then put it in and show you guys how to reinstall. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and this helped you out. Leave a like to let me know, and if not, let me know also by commenting and telling me or asking any questions you have. Just let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.